Hello, I'm Dan. Oh, not that one. Not much better. Oh, that's a bit better. Anyway, I'm Dan. I'm a pretty average guy. I've got a wife, kids, and a dog. And I built a shed. Cast your mind back a couple of summers. Something happened, something big. But not really what you're thinking. But that was part of it. It's more personal than that. About a month before the pandemic started, I'd started making music. I picked up a teenage engineering OPZ out of impulse and quickly fell in love with mangling sounds and modulating waves and making a right bloody racket. I've pretty much been obsessed with music all my life, but just listening to it and going to as many gigs as I could. But music creation had got so under my skin, it started to consume me. As the pandemic went on, lockdown after lockdown, I had more free time on my hands. My job allowed me to work from home, so now I had a desk for work and music production in the front room of my house. My squelchy, glitchy sounds were not all that appreciated by the aforementioned wife, kids, dog, and I was being told off with alarming regularity. Something had to give. It did. I'm going to build a garden office, I said to my wife. I think she didn't want her already small South London garden to be taken up with another shed. I knew I had the DIY skills to do it, and I had the motivation. This video is a little visual guide for anyone thinking about doing it themselves. Hopefully by watching it, it might give you a bit of an idea of what you can expect along the way of building something like this. I'll try my best to explain each stage of the build. If there's anything you need more detail on, chuck a comment below, and I'll do my best to answer. So if this sounds like it might be useful to you, stick around. Hopefully it might inspire you to build something like this of your own. Right, let's get started. So this is my garden before I started work. As you can see, it's not the biggest garden in the world. It's about 4 metres wide by about 6 metres long. I've had lots of DIY projects in the past, so the decking is already raised up and there's a frame underneath it. In the far corner on the right is a small shed full of stuff, and then a small greenhouse which I built on the side for growing herbs, which is going to have to go. So I deleted? What the hell? I dismantled it, that's what I mean. I didn't delete it, I dismantled it. So once I dismantled it and got it out of the way, I was able to get to the shed. But first, before taking it down, I had to empty it of all the junk that I'd accumulated over the years. No idea where it was all going to go, but I recycled a lot of it, gave stuff away, and binned stuff that I wasn't using. So as you can see, I took the shed down quite quickly. Anyway, called it beer o'clock and got in the hot tub for one last time before packing it up. As you can see here, there's already a frame underneath the decking which would be strong enough to support the new shed. So all I needed to do was cut the decking boards in the right places and remove those, and then I had the footprint of where the new shed was going to go. Then I could lay another frame on top of that, just to give it extra support. For my day job as a digital designer, I use an app called Figma. Now this is really intended for user interface design, but I found it a very quick way to take my pencil sketches and to turn them into highly accurate diagrams. I used 1 pixel to 1mm, so I was able to plot very detailed plans. This allowed me to work out exact quantities of materials to order and to reduce my waste to only a couple of sacks by the end of the build. I was conscious that I wanted to be as cost efficient as possible, but also not use more resources than I needed. Figma is free, I'll put a link in the description below. It's very easy to pick up and I highly recommend it as a tool to help draw out any plans you might have. I also used it as a visual way to see what materials I needed and to keep an eye on the costs. Anyway, back to the build. Once I had my plans finalised, I was able to start ordering all the materials I'd need. I was very lucky because I ordered my materials just before the global shortage hit and costs skyrocketed. The materials arrived on time, and due to having no other storage space, they had to be stored in my garden, which was a bit of an inconvenience because it meant I had to keep moving things around as I worked. If I could do this again, I'd fully clear my garden and make it a bit more accessible for working in. As you can see here, I finished one side of the insulation first. That was so I could put down the damp-proof membrane and then lay a sheet of OSB on top, which would give me a better platform to work on and also a bit more space back. And that meant I could go and finish the rest of the insulation quite easily. And here we are, just laying the final boards in. And as you can see, the offcuts on the OSB is very minimal. There was hardly any wastage at all there. I already had most of the tools I needed, but I did treat myself to this battery-powered Matika circular saw and this Craig rip cut guide, which was essential for allowing me to quickly make cuts to long sheets of OSB without having to measure and make marks and use rulers. It was so simple, so I definitely recommend getting one of those. Now I had a good base to work on, I could start on the sides. So like before, I made the frame, outside frame first, followed by the studs and then the noggins. As these are the same on both sides, I could use the one on the bottom as a template. Just loose lay the wood, measure it, cut it to size, and they were both exactly the same. Now I had the sides made, I held them together with a cross beam that allowed me to start positioning the OSB sheets in. This also allowed me to position the internal studs, and these all lined up exactly as per my plans, so I knew that I was going to be able to fit 2.5 sheets of OSB down the back. So the next part was to build the frames for the door and the windows. So as you can see here, just two rectangular frames either side of the doorway. As you can see here, there's a small brick wall to the right hand side of the base, which would prevent me from finishing off the cladding later. So I decided to complete the entire side wall first, and then I could fix it down in place and get on with finishing the main structure. I applied the feather edge cladding to above the top of the wall, and there's enough space just to get around the side and apply the final cladding later on. So once all the outside was watertight, it was ready to start to move on to the internal insulation. So now it was just a case of cutting all the PIR board to the right size and installing it. Now this was quite a difficult job. I originally started with a handsaw, which created quite a bit of dust, and the lines weren't very straight. I did a bit of research and found these Bosch soft material blades for the jigsaw, which made it so much easier, and there was hardly any dust. And the lines were practically straight, so if you're going to cut this kind of insulation, I highly recommend buying these blades rather than using a handsaw. As you can see here, I used expanding foam just to fill any of the larger gaps between the insulation board and the studwork. This was just to ensure that there was no cold air could leak through and make the internal walls colder. Because I was going to be in here making lots of noise and there's going to be lots of bass on my music, I wanted to try and soundproof the shed as much as possible. I'd already ordered soundproof plasterboard, which is heavier and denser than normal plasterboard, but I wanted to try and create a room within a room. But that isn't always possible with timber frame buildings. Usually brick buildings would be able to do this, but I wanted to give a bit more of an air gap between the plasterboard and the frame. So I used this foil back underfloor insulation roll on the walls just to give a bit more of an air gap between the plasterboard and the wall behind. And just as a byproduct, this would just allow for a little bit more resistance against moisture seeping through, and also add a bit of insulation. Now it's time to install the windows. I'd had these made and delivered. They were double glazed units with a heat resistant coating applied to the inside, and also it's sound reflective on the inside, and on the outside it was a security film applied, which means the window can't be smashed. Now it was time to finish the doors, and I wanted them to be as insulated as the walls, as it seemed a shame to go to all the effort to use really efficient insulation in the walls and have a cold door. So it was made with 50mm thick PIR insulation, which is much more insulated than regular shed type door. As you can see, it's using the leftover OSB just to make it really secure, nice and thick and heavy. So now the walls and the ceiling were painted, I was able to move on to the floor. I bought this really nice wood effect laminate, which will be just fine for a shed, and decided to lay it at 45 degrees rather than usual straight effect. Again, I used Figma to really accurately lay out how the planks of the floor would need to be laid, just to reduce the amount of waste and to know exactly where I needed to cut. It was finally time to invite my family in to come and have a look at my hard work. I think they were pretty impressed. Then I was able to start setting up my desk. It was still a bit cramped and messy as there was tools all over the place, but it was definitely enough space to start working. And it was my first taste of being in my own hand-built office. The next stage was to install my TV and to set up my hi-fi system and my KEF speakers and Riga turntable. Now, I became quite aware that I was putting quite a lot of valuable stuff in this space, so I needed to think about security. I'd already made sure the windows had security film on, so they should be quite safe. But I wanted to make sure the door was super secure too, so I bought 2 of these heavy-duty van locks. As you can see, they're going to be very difficult to cut off, and I have 2 of these concealed behind the cladding of the door. I had some OSB left over, so I thought rather than throw it away, I'd use it to make this small media unit. I ordered some legs from Amazon and just left it untreated, as I quite like the raw OSB look. As you can see on the left hand side, there's a pair of frames made from other bits of leftover OSB. These were used to make the acoustic panels you can see behind my speakers. If you're interested in knowing how to make these, very easily and very cheaply, then hit subscribe and the bell icon, and you'll be notified when it's ready. had enough insulation and fabric left to make these window baffles. They're quite handy because not only do they insulate against heat and sound, they also allow you to block out all light, which is great when you want to watch a movie or play video games. So, here's the finished product. It took me about 2 months to build in the end, and that was mostly weekends and evenings, and the occasional spot of painting during my lunch break. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out, and it's been really warm through the winter. I've had no leaks, there's no cracks, and it blocks out even the lowest of base, so I'd say that's a pretty good result all in all. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this has been enjoyable and useful, and as I said, if there's any questions you have about any of the build, chuck a question below. If you've enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more of these kind of music related DIY builds, then please subscribe. I've got more tutorials planned, as well as my usual live jam sessions. If you're going to be building something like this for yourself, then good luck. Remember to be organised, plan, and always measure twice. And remember to have fun. See ya!